Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime, and it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude.
Welcome. Today I'm speaking with Melvese Johnson, who is a native New Yorker. She currently resides in Colorado. She has 4 sons and 5 grandchildren. She loves to travel and faithfully serves as the production coordinator at her church. Her passion for writing led her to become a published author, ghostwriter, editor, and publisher. Anointed to help independent authors spread God's word, she established Written Words Publishing LLC to provide the type of service that she expects to receive: professional, proficient, reliable, patient, timely, and affordable. That is amazing. Welcome, Melvese. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm kind of excited to have our conversation. I love it when God introduces me to people in unusual ways. And so you ended up being the company that a book that I was part of, a collaborative book, Courageous Voices Unlocked, ended up using to format and publish their book. And I don't even know that they originally were going to work with you, but God brought you into this picture and he brought you into my life. And I really enjoyed our pre-recording call. There were just so many beautiful things that I could see in your story. So I'm very excited to have you as a guest today.
Thank you.
So as those of you who listen know, and if you're new to the show, just to let you know, we do things just a little bit differently here. We start at the beginning, and any good writer loves to do that. It's very important to start at the beginning and to know your whole story. But how often do you stop really and go all the way back and look at your childhood up to what's going on now? But we have found that when we do that, we are able to see God working in each and every story. And it's been just such a beautiful thing. And a lot of times you end up getting blessed by your own story. That's just how God is, which is pretty amazing. So would you be willing to tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Sure. So, as you stated, I'm a native New Yorker. I was born and raised in New York City. And I lived when I was in elementary school. I actually lived in Queens. I was a very intelligent child, and after daycare, when I was about the age that you would send a child to kindergarten, my skills were above kindergarten. So my mother, she went to the public school in the Flushing community of Queens, and she said, my daughter, she's smart enough to be in first grade right now. And they said, well, we're gonna have to test her, and they tested me, and I passed the test. So I started, first grade when I was 5 years old, and I've always was always a an A student. Math was always my favorite subject, although I love reading and writing. And I was raised out there with my brother, my younger brother, and my grandmother.
Yeah, you had told me during our pre-recording call that your grandmother was a really big part of your life. And I always love to ask guests about that. God always peppers in these other people, whether they're from extended family or whether they're neighbors or parents of your friends when you're little, to kind of be there for us. Can you tell us a little bit about your grandmother?
Yeah, so my grandmother, she instilled a lot of the values that I, hold steadfast to today, that I instilled in my kids, that she instilled in my mother, that my mother instilled in and my brother and I, to like always be respectful, always look a person in the eye when they're speaking to you, always say please and thank you, and, be polite and be respectful, respect your
Mhm.
elders, just all that good old school values that a lot of kids nowadays don't don't get taught or
Yeah,
exercise.
yeah.
Things that would make the world a better place. Everybody would be a lot happier if you would just say please and thank you and be appreciative and
Amen.
smile and show some
Mhm.
generosity and some kindness.
I do. I do. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that because of your intelligence, you started first grade early. Did you ever notice that there were any kind of social or emotional differences by being younger, or did everything just fall into place?
No, I never felt out of place. I was always more into academics than social, always like,
Hmm.
the one always raising my hand.
Hmm.
When I got to high school and you had the opportunity to sit wherever you wanted in the class, I always sat in the front of the class.
Mm,
Yeah, so I never felt any type of disadvantage being always at least a year younger than everyone else in my class.
that's good. That's good. Now, what would you say if you had to just sum up your school time? You loved learning, obviously. Like, what would be the one memory that might stand out, or the one way that you would describe it?
Hmm. I mean, I would say I always, strive to make sure I passed and got the highest grades that I could achieve. I was always a A or B student, never received any grades lower than a B
Mhm.
all throughout, my education. So I mean, I was just extremely studious. Take good notes.
Yeah.
Always take good notes.
Well, God was setting you up for later for sure. Now we had also talked a little bit about your teen years during our pre-recording call, and you had told me that you were a teen parent. I was wondering if you would share with us how you handled that experience, and did that affect things like being studious and furthering your education? How did that all work out?
Okay, so when I was in high school, right,
Hmm.
ninth and 10th grade, both of those years, I went to after school and I went to summer school just because I could. It wasn't a requirement, but the classes were available, so I took them.
Hmm.
So my 11th, my year, my junior year, when uh, I was pregnant. I was
Hmm.
pregnant when my junior year started. I was 9 months pregnant,
Hmm. Wow.
and I was 15 years old, and I transferred to a high school in New York City. They had what were called alternative high schools. So I
Hmm.
transferred to a high school where I was able to. It had a daycare center, so I was able to go to school and
Wow.
take my child to school with me.
Hmm.
So at the beginning of the school year, right before my first son was born, I was sitting down with the guidance counselor, and she told me that um, I had enough credits that I could graduate that year. So I
Wow.
actually finished high school within 3 years.
That's amazing.
I graduated from high school when I was 16. I took my son to school with me every day to the daycare center that was at the school, and I had him on stage with me during graduation. I was the salutatorian for my
Uh-huh.
graduating class. I actually had the highest GPA, but they bumped me down from valedictorian to salutatorian because
Hmm.
the female that they gave the valedictorian title to, she had a full scholarship to college.
Hmm.
So, but
Wow.
yeah, so it
Oh,
did not.
so you had
I'm sorry.
an early year in, and then you finished a year early, so you were kind of 2 years ahead of everybody.
Yes, I graduated high school when I was 16 and started
Mhm.
college when I was 16.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. We could just put a pin right there. Not only to do that, but to do that and be a mother. I'm assuming you had support from your family.
I had support from my family. Even though I was a teen parent, my mother never belittled me or shamed
Hmm.
me for becoming a teen parent. She always, gave me whatever support I needed. And even after when I that last year that I was in high school, I actually did internship at the high school working as the assistant for the guidance counselor. And then when I graduated from high school, the school
Hmm.
hired me as the school secretary. So I
Wow.
actually worked full time for the New York City Board of Ed and went to college full time while being a teen parent. And yeah, my mother was there to support me, and she watched my son for me while I attended college classes at night.
That's awesome. Also, all of that going on at the same time and being able to figure out how to excel in each area probably really became helpful in helping people with books, because I know, as somebody who's about to release a new book, all of the different moving parts that there are in editing and formatting and the book cover and all the different things, it really does take a special person who's fully focused and organized and able to decompartmentalize all the different things. I think that's an interesting um, way that God is using that part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I am extremely good with multitasking.
Hmm.
I'm extremely good with dealing with stress and pressure.
Yeah.
Being the mother of four sons, I have
Hmm.
dealt with my share of stress and
I bet.
aggravation. I am extremely patient. I always say that was God's greatest gift to me. He was patience.
Yeah.
I am extremely patient and I have the ability to, deal with all personalities. So yeah, that was definitely a blessing because
Yeah.
it
I just love
comes
to
in
see
handy.
how God takes something organic, or something that He's instilled in you as an ability, and then mixes them together and uses them for His kingdom later. It's always so wonderful to kind of unpack and look at. Now, eventually, you left that job, which in itself is just a really wonderful, miraculous provision from God that you're able to just continue on. And you worked for a lawyer part time, and then you became a full time legal secretary. Tell us a little bit about that. That also sounds like a lot.
Yeah, so I became a full-time legal secretary, which was an awesome job. Another place where all that patience God gave me and being able to deal with all personalities played
Hmm.
a huge part. I don't know if you know any lawyers, but they are definitely not easy to deal with.
Yeah, lawyers and doctors. I mean, yeah, I do.
Yeah, so but it was great and the pay, New York City, the pay was well. So that's what really drove me, I mean, when it came time for me to change, or I moved over from working for the Board of Ed to working for a management company. And then while I was working for that management company, their lawyer needed assistance. And that's how I started doing the part-time work as a legal secretary in the
Hmm.
evening, working for that lawyer. And then something happened with that company, and the IRS came in there and seized all their files and shut them down. And they had to let all their staff go. I went to, employment agencies and, filled out applications and ended up landing a job with working for a big law firm in New York City. And
Hmm.
everything just fell right into place.
Yeah, it sounds like it did. That's awesome. Now,
Hmm.
you've talked a little bit about your sons. Why don't we hear a little bit about your husband? What is he like? How did you meet him? Tell us a little about your children and what it's like being a mom.
Okay, well, he's my ex-husband now, but
Okay.
he was my high school sweetheart, and we
Hmm.
graduated from high school together and got married in 1996.
Hmm.
And after our third son was born, and then when my oldest son, when it was time for my second son to start first grade, we had our oldest son in private school, which
Hmm.
was very expensive. So when it came time for our second son to start school, we decided to leave New York City and
Hmm.
move down to North Carolina, for the better, education, not to have to send them to private school to get a good education.
Yeah.
And so that's when I moved from New York to North Carolina. And then
Wait,
right,
before
I'm
you
sorry.
go on, you had told me something I just don't want to skip over because I thought it was just again this beautiful protection and provision from God that when you moved for the job, had you not taken it, that you would have
Oh
been in
my
the World
goodness.
Trade Center
Yes.
during
Yes.
nine
So
11.
right
Yeah.
before, so the law firm that I work for had an office in North Carolina, in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I was transferring from the New York office to the Charlotte office, and I was taking a $10,000 pay cut to do
Hmm.
that transfer. Right before we got ready to move, I received a call with a job offer at Wells Fargo down in the World Trade Center. Like I told you, I went to school, I have an accounting degree,
Hmm.
and I had applied for, CPA jobs and things of that nature when I was, going through all the employment agencies when I had to, find a new job. And just out the blue, they called me and offered me a job working at Wells Fargo down at the World Trade Center, making
Hmm.
$10,000 more than I was making at the law firm in New York. But
Hmm.
I turned it down. I turned it down. If I would have took that job, we would
Yeah.
have had enough money to afford to send, my second son to public, to private school, and it could have worked. But I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I turned it down, and I went to North Carolina. And after 9/11, I realized if I would have took that job, I would have been in
Yeah.
the World Trade Center on 9/11.
Yeah, it's the reason why I didn't want to skip over it is sometimes when we're looking at our story in the moment, we don't always see the hand of God. But when we look back, we're able to see not only the things that did happen and he was there, but the things that didn't happen because he was there. And I think that's one of those times.
That was definitely one of those times.
Yeah,
I would say it is a clear testimony to how
yeah.
it is always a good idea to just follow your mind.
Hmm.
Do what your mind is telling you is best to do versus what you may think may be better materialistically or financially or even common sense wise, for lack of a better way to
Well,
describe it.
yeah, I mean, when you're prayerful and you have a relationship with God and he begins to show you what you should do, most of the time it doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't have this podcast if I did what made sense. I moved to take care of my parents during a pandemic, was completely cut off, couldn't write, couldn't be in person for anything, couldn't go to church. It was just quietly over here. And I told God I miss sharing the gospel. Next thing I know, I'm buying a microphone and converting an old closet in a 1600s farmhouse in a pandemic into a podcasting booth. And look what he's done. I had
Right.
no idea what I was doing, but he heard my heart to want to share about him. And he said, okay, well, I do.
Right. Here's another aspect of that story where I can testify that it was all God,
Hmm.
because when I moved to North Carolina that
Hmm.
night, that first night we got there, I had a seizure. And when I went to the doctor, I found out I was 5 months pregnant. And I didn't know that I was pregnant
Wow.
when I left New York. And if I would have known that I
Hmm.
was pregnant, I wouldn't have left.
Yeah.
And with all of the the three children I had prior to my fourth son, I knew I was pregnant within the first 3 months. This is the first time I was 5 months pregnant and didn't even know I was pregnant.
Wow. I
That
can't even
that that's
imagine
God.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
That was God right there. Because he knows me. If I would have known I was pregnant, I would have just took that job at the World Trade Center and stayed in New York.
Well, that's right. He does know you. And honestly, the way he works is so mysterious. Now, once you had that seizure, you began to have more. You said you didn't know why you were having them, and you told me you had 20 years of refractory epilepsy. Like, how did that change your life?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, refractory epilepsy is when you are epileptic and the medications don't have an effect. So all the different medications that the doctor prescribed that we tried, it didn't matter what the dosage was or what type of medication I
Mm,
took, it did not stop the seizures.
wow. That,
And I had to deal with that for over 20 years, and it just came out the blue. I had never experienced anything like that before, and it it, it was a strain on me mentally,
yeah.
because I don't know if you know anyone who's epileptic, but when you are attacked by a seizure, it literally drains every piece of energy out of your body from your
Mm,
head to your toes. And on top of that, the portion of the brain where the seizures were triggered
mhm,
was the portion of my brain that controls, it was my left temporal lobe, which controls your short-term memory.
mm,
So a lot of my memory is gone. It really amazes me the things that I do remember, because most things I do not remember.
wow.
And I can meet someone and then meet them again, and it's like I've never seen them before. And they'll come up to me like, "Oh yeah, how you doing?" All smiling, know my name and everything. And I'm looking at them like, "Wow, who was this? Where did I meet this person?" Or misspeaking. I'll mean to say refrigerator and I'll say stove,
Mhm,
or
yeah.
asking a question and then totally forgetting that I asked that question, totally forgetting the answer, and asking the same question over again. To retain memory, I remember what I read and write more
Mhm,
so than what I hear.
mm,
So if it's something that I know I need to remember, I'll write it down, because I know if I write it down, then I'll retain it.
yeah.
So it was a toll on. I felt like, remember, I told you I was always a good student. I always felt like my brain was my greatest asset. And
Mhm,
then when the seizure started, I felt like my brain was broken, like I was
mm,
a broken asset now.
yeah. Do you think at any point, because you do talk a lot about learning and your brain and intelligence being so important to you, do you think there was any part of that that kind of took over your identity a little bit? Like, do you think God was trying to get you to the point, not that he made it happen for that, but that he used that to bring you more into a place of your full identity? Was his child first?
Hmm. I mean, it's obvious it happened for a reason. Um, I'm not sure if I have identified exactly what that reason was. I mean,
Hmm.
I pray and wish that the worst part about it was the fact that my kids had to witness that,
Yeah.
practically all their life, especially my youngest son, because I was pregnant with him when the seizure started. So
Yeah.
all my life, God only knows how many times he picked me up, off the floor. It even got to the point where when he um, became an adult, graduated from high school, he was scared to leave home because he didn't want
Yeah.
to leave me by myself. And I had to let him know, I'm all right. You don't have to look after me. You don't have to protect me. You need to go out and live your own life. I'm fine. I'm going to be fine. If he didn't know where I was, and if he happened
Mhm.
to come home or call me and I didn't answer the phone, he would start freaking out, and well, Mom, where are you? Because
Yeah.
I mean, it was to the point where, like, see, some people, when they have seizures, they get some type of aura, some type of warning. Now the seizure is getting ready to happen, but I
Hmm.
didn't have that. And then on top of the fact that I experienced grand mal seizures and staring seizures,
Oh,
so
wow.
I could be walking. It happened to me one time when I went out to get some coffee with a coworker, and we were going back to the office, and a staring seizure attacked me right when we were getting ready to cross the street. And if she hadn't been there with me, I would have walked right into traffic. You
Wow.
know, so
That's just so powerful of an image, that you really had to trust God. And the reason why I asked was not in any way that God would have made that happen, but God will use what happens because we're in a fallen world, and in the creation has fallen to
yeah,
sometimes
y-
give us a way to reach other people who might be going through something similar emotionally. And I have a friend who, she now goes all over the world. She wrote a book and she goes all over the world speaking, and her particular thing was that she had such a low heart rate that they thought that she was just going to pass when they first discovered it, and how God has continued to sustain her so that she can go ahead and meet with people, saying like, I trust him even in that I might not be here when I'm done talking, and how he's used her to connect with people. And I hear a bit of that in you. I know a lot of people that go through these different kinds of, really, I mean, 20 years is a long time, these really difficult health situations, have depression, and they have to work through their feelings with God. And even just having you share what you shared about your son, that it's not just you, it's anyone in your life. And so what I was just saying is, I feel like this is a part of your story that a lot of people will be able to see a strength in you that comes from your faith alone.
yeah. You know what I can say, for one thing I know for sure, as far as my faith goes, I had to trust and believe in God to protect me, and believe in the angels that watch over me,
Hmm.
especially every time I left the house alone. Every time I got ready to cross the street, before I crossed the street, I would pray, Lord, get
Hmm.
me across this street safely,
Yeah.
And then, I joined a few epilepsy support groups, and you will always see pictures of people who that dealt with grand mal seizures, bruised up and banged up. All of
Hmm.
those years that I dealt with epilepsy, I never got one bruise or one broken
Wow.
bone or one fracture. I am certain that my angel that's watching over me caught me every single time I fell.
Yeah. Praise God. God is
Even in
amazing.
the bathroom, a seizure in the
Yeah.
bathroom, that small space, I didn't bang my head. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm certain
Yeah.
that my guardian angel, she's watching over me. She's protecting me.
Well, God really does show up in the intimate relationships that we have with Him. And sometimes the deeper, more intimate relationships come from needing to actually believe in Him taking care of us more than what it looks like. And that's a perfect example. And you're just a very, very strong person.
Yeah,
So
well,
we had
I
talked.
can't say that it was extremely embarrassing for me while it was going on. I did
Mhm,
not tell anyone that I was epileptic, if unless they happened to witness the seizure, they would not
mhm,
know, because
mhm.
a lot of people, once they found out that you dealt with epilepsy, then the way that they acted around you changed. They're like scared to be in your presence and things of that
Oh.
nature. If I ever had a seizure in a public place, I would be so embarrassed that I would never go back to that place. But now that I am healed, like
Mhm,
the seizures stopped just as miraculously as they appeared out of nowhere, they
mhm.
disappeared out of nowhere. They just stopped.
Wow.
And now that I'm not dealing with it anymore, I feel way more comfortable with sharing that part of my life with the world.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that if I was still dealing with the seizures, I wouldn't even be having this conversation with you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you did receive healing. That's amazing. And I do believe that God wants to use that part of your story, and He also knew how you felt. And I think it's amazing that you're healed and that you haven't had any more. That's a very long time to have seizures and then have none. So what a great way to be an arrow pointing to Him and His ability to do anything. One of the things I want to talk about is your writing, because it's your writing that ended up eventually leading to your having a publishing company as well. You told me that you were co-writing a book with your friend, and I don't know if you remember this from our pre-recording call, and she said something really pivotal to you. Do you remember what she said?
When we were co-writing the book, so that when we were writing the book, that is during a time in my life when I was I was dealing with depression over my health situation, dealing with issues with my husband at the time, and she told me she told me to watch Joel Osteen. Watch Joel Osteen, and when he, says that prayer at the end of his service, make sure you say that prayer. She basically just told me, get saved. Get saved.
Right. I'm glad that she gave you something where somebody was going to actually say the prayer and you could, but I think that's awesome. So what happened after you prayed that prayer?
So what happened after I prayed that prayer is, I got saved, and I started, because when I went to, I attended church regularly when I was in New York, and then when I got to North Carolina, I did try to find a church, but I couldn't find a church where I felt that I fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And so after she told me to do that, then I started watching Joel Osteen every Sunday. So that is what got me back into hearing God's word, on a regular basis. And then there was one night, my mother, she moved to North Carolina, and she had an apartment across the street from my house in North Carolina. And she was out walking her dog one night, and this lady in a church van, it was a Friday night, had came by to pick up someone from her complex, and she just happened to see her. And she's like, yeah, we're having this experience at this church tonight, a guest speaker, why don't you come? So my mother called me and said, she met this lady, come on, let's go to church. So we went to church, and I have been faithfully attending church ever since that night, like every week, every Wednesday Bible study, every Sunday in church.
Wow. Again, look at that. Just like breadcrumbs along the way here. Here's the way to go. And I love that God, again, used those people peppered into your life. You had someone telling you, hey, you need to get saved. You need to really submit and give your life to Jesus. And, having your mom move closer, having that woman be there, so many situations that got you back to a place where you're in the Word, you're in Bible study. And here's the thing, at that place, you told me you started noticing during Bible study that there were some typos occasionally on the screen, and you went to the pastor about it. So what happened as a result of that?
So, as a editor, typos just irk my nerves. I see them so easily and so clearly. And every Sunday, every Wednesday, we would go to church, and they have up on the screens the presentation, and there was typos every week, and it was just irking my nerves so bad. So one day after the service, I went to the pastor and I said, yeah, I noticed that, there's typos. I saw February misspelled up there, this morning, blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, okay, well, you know what? You can create the slides. you can create the slides. And so I joined, started serving at that church. And that was a really great thing for me at that point, because I had to stop working because of the frequency of the seizure attacks. Well, I lost my job, and I was in a really, really, really low place. I felt like I was worthless. I felt like I had no purpose. And after he told me to create the slides, and he started sending me his messages, the notes for his messages every week to review them and proof them and create the slides, then all of a sudden I felt like I had a purpose again. I felt like I could actually use my brain again. I felt like I didn't feel so nothing anymore. So that was definitely part of God's plan right there too.
Yeah, I can just see it, how God showed you. You still have a beautiful mind. And look, you notice things other people don't notice. And, you were able to then step into a role where you got to use the thing that you love the most, which was writing in your mind. And you obviously, you said you see them right away. Not everyone does. That's really pretty cool.
Yes, yes, yes. And so that, that pastor, when I always say, when I started out at that church, I was a baby Christian. But I have grown so much since that time, and all of that, and it all came into play because revising his notes every week and creating the slides caused me to read the Bible, so
Yeah.
I'm more familiar with the Bible and the scriptures and things of that nature. It's just like all the different woven pieces just fell into place. And even after I left North Carolina and moved to Colorado, I still continue to serve, him and create, edit his notes and take care of him, from a editorial perspective, send out his newsletters, his weekly newsletters, and
That's
things of that
awesome.
nature. And the first book that he wrote, he actually hired me to edit his book, and that was my first editing job. And now, all these years later, he's actually one of my clients. We released a book that him and his wife wrote a few months ago, the Master's Plan for Marriage. What's the title of that book? Yeah, the Master's Plan for Marriage: a Successful Guide to Biblical Marriage, by
Oh, that's
Leon and
awesome.
Carol Threet. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. So really your publishing company started as kind of an outpouring of just wanting to serve, realizing that you had this talent and you had this desire to want things to be right, and then being able to just help him. I love that you stayed connected, and that even when you moved to Colorado, you continued to work with him, and that he became a client with his wife. So tell me, how did you get from the place of realizing this is something you really love to do, also loving to write yourself? How did you get to the point where you were focused on helping other authors? And you told me during a pre-recording call that you asked God for something specific. And I wanted to talk about what you asked him for, because I kind of have something to say about that. So,
Okay.
okay.
Well, first, so after the first book that my friend and I wrote, the cost to publish that book was exorbitant. And so, I decided I wanted to start a publishing company to publish my own books. That was the initial goal. And one of the other members at that church, after I edited Pastor Threet's first book, and they found out I edited, they wrote it. Her and her friend wrote a book, and they wanted me to edit their book. And I told them I was planning on starting a publishing company, and they said, well, they wanted me to publish their book also. And they actually, after they wrote their book and edited, waited for Written Words Publishing to be established, and they were actually our first published authors. So that's how. And then my friend, we had outlines for 26 more books, and she just fell on some hard times with her health and her personal situation and stuff that prevented her from finishing her portion of the book. So I said, okay, well, I'll just wait for you. And so in the meantime, I went ahead and established Written Words Publishing, and then just started serving other authors. And that's how I got to where I am today.
But you had told me, and I think that's all amazing. Again, you had told me that you asked God specifically about something about.
Yes. So
Yeah.
so I have a vision wall. I've had a vision wall ever since way back when I was in North Carolina. I had a vision wall. And when I was working on the first book with 4 children, always coming and interrupting me, I would say, if you see me sitting here with my pen and paper spread out on my computer, now is not the kind of time to come, mommy, 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 mommy. I wanted a house where I could go and write in peace. And there was a writing contest for a house. in Colorado, where you entered the writing contest. The entry fee was like $100, and whoever won the contest, they were going to give you this house in Colorado. So I had a house in Colorado on my vision wall. And I guess they didn't get enough entries, so they didn't give away the house, but I kept that house in Colorado on my vision wall. And then once I moved to Colorado, I still had a house in Colorado on my vision wall. I wanted to purchase a house in Colorado. So when I purchased my house in Colorado in 2023, it was October 2023 when we when I got this house. I took the house in Colorado off my wall. That was like a real goal. That had been on my wall for so long. And I said, oh my goodness, God, like what's going to be my next big goal? What am I going to do? What am I supposed to replace that space with? And he told me to write a bestseller, write a New York Times bestseller. And I'm a ghostwriter. So I assumed that I just needed to ghostwrite a book for someone that was going to turn into a New York Times bestseller. Because even though, you ghostwrite is not yours, but it's yours.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
I'm helping someone too. And what I loved is when we had the pre-recording call, you said that, and I said, well, you better take the ghostwriter part out of that. God didn't say that. You are going to write a New York Times bestseller. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I came to the revelation. I'm part of a mastermind class that I participate in every Saturday. And we talk about our passion projects. And when I said that my passion project was to write a New York Times bestseller, that I'm just waiting for the right client to come along so I can ghostwrite this book. The teacher was like, well, you're an author. Why don't you write the book yourself? Why don't you become the New York Times bestseller? And it was like a light bulb went off in my head, like, wow, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And
so that is my next big goal. My plan is to become a New York Times bestseller. I'm in the process of revising the first book and finishing the second book to release them back to back and do everything that needs to be done so that I can be a New York Times bestseller. It's part of God's plan for me, so I know it's going to happen.
Well, that's awesome, and I can't wait. And you can come back on the podcast when that happens, and we can talk about it.
Awesome.
And I love thanking God in advance for things that He promises us, and so I think that's an exciting thing. Now, we had said in the very beginning, we first met because you were the publisher for a book that I was part of that was a collaborative book called Courageous Voices Unlocked. Can you tell us what was your experience working with everyone? I know I just released today the episode with Stephanie Miller, who was, she's an author who was the editor for that book. And that's how I first met her. I've really enjoyed all the people I've met from the book. So tell me, what was that experience like? Because that's somebody, Carmel is in Australia. So that was like a different experience, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I'm a part of a Facebook group of writers, authors, and publishers and editors. It's a really big group on Facebook, a real nice group because the moderators, they do a really good job of making sure there's no spam. And, people post comments all the time looking for whatever type of advice or, questions they might have or assistance or just maybe some encouragement and things of that nature. And I know that Stephanie is a part of that group also. So at some point, there must have been a post or a comment or something that I made in that group that triggered Stephanie to contact me to inquire. They were looking for someone to format the book. So the book is actually published by Carmel Gardens Publishing Company. But they hired Written Words Publishing to format the book and do the ebook conversion, upload the files, and do the full cover and everything basically, that all the technical things that needed to be that are involved with creating and publishing an excellent book. So it just all fell into place. So we had a meeting with a Zoom meeting with Carmel and Stephanie, and we talked and we prayed, and Carmel was just really impressed with me, and impressed with the fact that I'm a child of God, and I don't hide that. And she came back and said, yeah, I'd like to hire you to do this, and that's how it came about.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, there are so many parts to a book. I don't think people realize when you pick up a book to read it, there's an entire community behind, what's been written and all of the different moving parts of getting it to be something that you can sit down and read, that has a cover, that has visual appeal, that has someone who's checked to make sure there aren't a lot of typos, that you can really experience what the author has in mind. And so we're grateful for people like you, Melvese, who not only are writers, but also help other writers get their work out. That's wonderful. So I'm going to ask you one more question. I could go get a cup of coffee and talk to you for hours, I'm sure, but in light of time,
Yes.
I like to end the podcast each and every week with this question. Not that we can go back in time and change anything, but the people listening are often able to apply the wisdom to their life right now. So if you could go back and give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
I would just tell my younger self, uh, it's all part of his plan. It's all part of his plan. Everything happens for a reason. Every single thing happens for a reason. Every time I look back at all the different things that I've gone through, even the turmoils and the trials and tribulations, if that had not happened, I would not be where I am today. So there's no way that you have to go through trials and tribulations to reach your purpose, to reach success. It's inevitable. So
Yeah.
I would tell myself, be thankful for the hard times, because it's only going to lead to greater times in the future.
Very wise advice. I will definitely take that advice. Well, I wanted to thank you, Melvese, for taking the time today to share your story, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. This was awesome. Yes, it's just one of many more interviews I am going to have to do as a New York Times bestselling author. So this was
That's
just
right.
a great starter for me.
It's good practice.
Yes.
When I go on other people's shows and I'm not the one leading the conversation, I love it, because the more you do them, the more you're able to talk about God in any situation, whether you know what questions are coming or not. And it's really good practice. So you keep doing them.
Yes. And I'll just tell your listeners to be faithful and thank God for all things, big and small, every single thing, big and small, and be sure to thank Him for everything that you ask for, because even if you don't see it, it's already done.
Amen. Well, what a great way to end. And again, I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. If you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day, and go be grateful.